She slid the divorce papers across the marble table at breakfast. Calm, deliberate, done. No screaming, no tears. Just a quiet woman who had finally decided she was worth more than being invisible. For 5 years, Eleanor spoke to a man who never listened. She laid out his clothes, warmed his soup, raised his son, and he couldn't even remember her birthday. While she was erasing herself to become the perfect Mrs. Hayes, he was celebrating another woman's birthday at the restaurant she had booked for herself. But here's the part no one talks about. The most painful prisons don't have bars. They have marble countertops, designer wardrobes, and a last name everyone envies. The day Eleanor stopped being Mrs. Hayes was the day she started being herself. And that moment will cost you nothing, but it might be worth everything. This story is a reminder that freedom isn't given to you. You have to choose it, even when you're terrified, even when you're standing alone. If this hit close to home, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe so you never miss a story like this, because the next one might be the one that changes everything. This content was manually researched, built, and edited by our team to bring you meaning and a lesson worth keeping.
It starts, as these stories often do, in a place that looks like a paradise of modern design. I'm told Ryan Hayes slid the divorce papers across the gleaming marble of their breakfast bar. His voice, my source said, was unnervingly calm, as if he were merely discussing a minor dip in the stock market. I've been thinking about what our son said last night, all night. If he really wants Jessica Miller in his life that badly, then fine, I'll agree to a divorce. He was apparently offering a clean break. I'll give up my claim to custody of Tyler, he continued. I won't take a thing. You can put my entire share of our assets into a trust fund for him. It can be my parting gift for his upbringing. But as Madison Vance, his wife of 5 years, set down her coffee, she noticed it. The faint, steady blue glow of the Bluetooth earpiece nestled in his ear. He wasn't talking to her. He was on a call. The understanding, my source said, was instantaneous and crushing. He hadn't heard a single word she'd said. It was the same wave of utter helplessness that had defined her marriage for 5 long years. Every attempt at connection hit this same invisible, impenetrable wall. It was just like the last few months, when he'd walk through the door every evening cloaked in the scent of a perfume she didn't own. She had finally cracked and asked him about it once, her voice small. "Who have you been with so often?" He'd tossed off a casual, "just a friend," his eyes never even leaving the screen of his tablet. My source tells me Madison sometimes wondered if he even remembered her name was Madison Vance. She was done suffocating. She flipped the document to the final page and slid it back in front of him. "Just sign it. It won't take more than a minute of your time," she insisted. Ryan's eyes finally disconnected from his call, and a flicker of pure annoyance crossed his face as he looked at her. But just as his gaze shifted toward the papers, their young son, Tyler, came skidding into the room. "Daddy, are you playing golf with Aunt Jessica later? I want to come too." As Ryan began to stand, Madison did something he didn't expect. She pressed her hand firmly on his wrist. "Sign." And for the first time in what felt like a lifetime, Ryan Hayes truly looked at his wife. My source described a clear note of surprise in his eyes, the look of a man unaccustomed to his quiet, compliant wife showing any force at all. Tyler grew more insistent, pulling at his father's sleeve. "Daddy, hurry! If we keep Aunt Jessica waiting, she'll get mad and tease you again. All right?" In the next moment, without so much as a glance at the agreement he was validating, Ryan Hayes picked up a pen and scrawled his signature. In a flash, father and son were gone. Madison was left alone, staring at the ink, unable to decide if his action was born from complete trust or the most profound indifference she had ever witnessed. She took the pen, and next to his powerful, arrogant signature, she carefully wrote her own name, one deliberate stroke at a time. In this lifetime, I'm told, the names Madison Vance and Ryan Hayes had appeared side by side only twice. The first time was on their marriage certificate, a document of promise. The second was here, on a document of dissolution. As she finished, a single tear fell onto the page. She gently wiped it away, placed the papers in a pre-addressed envelope for her attorney, and went upstairs to dismantle a life that was never hers. Opening her closet was like looking at a stranger's wardrobe. It was full of clothes that felt alien and ostentatious, a costume for a part she was forced to play. Not a single piece was something she truly loved. No one in that world knew that the girl she'd been before she turned 16 loved the thrill of bungee jumping, drove cars way too fast, and laughed with abandon. But marrying Ryan Hayes meant being remade. She was molded, reshaped, forced to be gentle and serene, her smile a carefully measured curve. The Hayes dynasty, my source explained, never needed an individual. They needed a suitable Mrs. Hayes. Yet even after sanding down all her edges to become their perfect woman, she hadn't earned a single ounce of his affection. Instead, she became a running joke in Ryan's circle. They called her a doll with no soul. The whispers were everywhere that Jessica Miller and Ryan Hayes were the real love story, the ones truly meant to be. Thinking of this, looking at the clothes that symbolized her failure to be enough, a wave of nausea hit her. She rushed to the bathroom, dry heaving over the toilet. When she looked up, her reflection was a perfect mask of makeup with hollow, empty eyes. Divorcing him was the only right decision she had ever been allowed to make. She refused to be strangled by the title of Mrs. Hayes any longer. She had to break out of this gilded cage and find herself again. Finally, from the back of the closet, she dug out a dress she hadn't worn since before her wedding and called her best friend, Olivia. "Can you come pick me up?" The Hayes penthouse was never her home, and the Vance family, after arranging her marriage into the Hayes dynasty, had long since washed their hands of her. That wasn't her home either. Olivia pulled up to the curb, her face a canvas of confusion. "Maddie, what is going on? Isn't it your birthday today? A week ago, you were telling me you were going to celebrate with your husband and your son." Madison froze. She pulled out her phone and scrolled through her messages. Sure enough, a week ago, she had booked a table at their favorite restaurant. She'd even sent a hopeful, timid message to Ryan about it. The message was still there, sitting starkly in the chat history, unread and unanswered. Was she disappointed? In the past, this would have shattered her. But now, all she felt was a deep, profound numbness. She got into Olivia's car, and they drove to the restaurant she had booked. But as soon as she gave her reservation name, the maitre d' approached them with an apologetic expression. "Ma'am, I'm so terribly sorry," he said. "Mr. Hayes has booked the entire restaurant for a private event this evening. He's celebrating his wife's birthday with his son. We will, of course, refund your deposit double." My source said Olivia just laughed, a sharp, bitter sound, and pulled Madison forward. "No need for a refund. You're looking at the actual Mrs. Hayes right here." But as they reached the center of the grand dining room, they were met with the sound of joyful laughter. Ryan was there with Tyler, presenting a birthday cake to Jessica Miller. Ryan's voice was gentle in a way Madison had never heard. "Happy birthday, Jessica. May all your wishes come true." Tyler then echoed him enthusiastically. "Happy birthday, Aunt Jessica. I hope you wish to marry Daddy and become my new mommy." Madison stood frozen, watching the happy tableau of the three of them settling at their table. Ryan's gaze never left Jessica, not for a single second. And her son, the child she had carried for 9 months and endured a life-threatening labor to birth, was thoughtfully pulling out Jessica's chair, pouring her water, and even carefully tucking a stray strand of hair behind her ear. He was a perfect little gentleman for another woman. In 5 years of marriage, Ryan had never known her birthday, let alone offered a single blessing. In his entire life, Tyler had never poured her a glass of water or handed her a napkin. Olivia, furious, rolled up her sleeves, ready to march over and confront them. But Madison grabbed her arm. "It's not worth it," she said, her voice completely flat. "I've already signed the divorce papers with Ryan." Olivia immediately drove Madison to her own apartment in Brooklyn. Madison didn't cry. Instead, it was Olivia who burst into tears, hugging her friend and ranting. "That man is a gaslighting narcissist, and that little boy is a spoiled brat. For 5 years, your entire life has been about them. You gave up your career, your social life," Olivia sobbed. "I finally get you to come out for a coffee, and one call from him sends you running home to make some special hangover cure. When Tyler was a baby and wouldn't stop crying, how many sleepless nights did you spend holding him? You gave them everything, Maddie, and this is how they repay you. I know you must be hurting. It's okay to cry. Just let it out." Listening to Olivia, Madison picked up a beer from the coffee table and took a long swallow. Leaning back on the couch, she whispered, "Cry, I can't anymore. My source said the tears had run dry years before, during all the times Ryan's mother forced her to learn endless, tedious rules of etiquette. And she'd tried to confide in Ryan, only to be treated like thin air. The tears dried up on the nights she'd waited until midnight for him. And he didn't come home. He didn't even send a text. The tears stopped for good the night Tyler had a dangerously high fever, and she'd frantically called Ryan, only for him to hang up on her. She had once naively hoped for a life of marital bliss and motherly love, but they had never once seen her as part of their family. 5 years. She should have woken up a long, long time ago. After a night of drinking, Madison slept heavily. The next morning, her phone rang. The caller ID read Ryan Hayes. His voice was thick with sleep. "Where did I put the Patek Philippe I wear on Mondays?" Without thinking, Madison replied, "In the walk-in closet, top drawer of the dresser, and the matching cufflinks are in the drawer below the watch." The exchange was so automatic that it took her a moment to remember they were getting divorced. She no longer had to wake up at dawn to lay out his clothes for the day. She no longer had to wait until midnight with a bowl of perfectly warmed soup for his return. It seemed Ryan hadn't even noticed she had moved out of their penthouse. Patiently, she reminded him, "You should have the housekeeper reorganize your closet. You can ask her for things from now on. We're getting a divorce. It's not really appropriate for you to keep calling me for this." She heard a non-committal from his end, followed by the sound of a drawer opening. Thinking the matter was settled, she was about to hang up when she heard his next instruction. "Have that seafood chowder from downtown delivered to my office at Hayes Tower for lunch for the next few days." The line went dead. Madison let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. So all her words about the divorce had gone in one ear and out the other. It felt like screaming into a void. She took a deep breath, her fingertips trembling with anger, and promptly blocked Ryan's number. For good measure, she also blocked the number for Tyler's preschool teacher. But she had forgotten about his mother. So when she finally woke up properly and headed out for a late lunch, she was intercepted by Mrs. Catherine Hayes. My source says Catherine Hayes strong-armed her into a chauffeured car. The moment the door closed, the matriarch threw a stack of glossy photos into Madison's lap. They were all intimate shots of Ryan and Jessica. "Madison, you've disappointed me immensely," she began. "From the day you turned 16, I personally taught you everything you needed to know to be a Hayes wife. From what I've been told by sources deep within the family, the beginning of the end for Madison Hayes started with a single venomous sentence from her mother-in-law. 'A decade,' she'd hissed, 'and you still can't secure my son's heart. Had I known you'd be this incapable, I would have chosen Jessica from the start, regardless of her family.' As she spoke, she tossed a framed photo onto the table, its sharp corner grazing Madison's throat, leaving a paper-thin crimson line. To the outside world, Madison had won the lottery when the powerful Hayes family chose her as their son Ryan's future wife. But those close to her knew the devastating reality. From the moment she turned 16, her life was no longer her own. Every move, every choice was engineered to sculpt her into the flawless Mrs. Hayes, and the pressure was suffocating. I've learned that during her senior year of high school, she staged a desperate rebellion, finding a boyfriend and ensuring Ryan heard about it. It was a calculated last-ditch effort to shatter the engagement she never wanted. But Ryan, true to form, remained silent, impassive. The Hayes family, however, acted with chilling speed, whisking her away to a notoriously strict finishing school in Switzerland before she could even say goodbye to her friends. Though her marriage to Ryan lasted only 5 years, the family's iron grip had been on her life for 10, and she'd finally reached her breaking point. My source says she met her mother-in-law's glare with an unnerving calm and said, "I've already signed the divorce papers with Ryan." "I'm not fighting for custody," she continued, her voice steady. "And I'm not taking a single dollar. Since you find me so unsatisfactory, feel free to find a replacement you deem more suitable." She turned for the door, but Mrs. Hayes, recovering from the initial shock, lunged forward and grabbed her wrist. "Madison, you wouldn't dare," she snarled, her long, blood-red nails digging into Madison's arm like tiny daggers. Madison, I'm told, slowly turned her head back, a small, knowing smile touching her lips. "There's nothing I wouldn't dare to do anymore," she said. "The title of Mrs. Hayes was never an honor. It was a cage." She then pulled up her sleeve, exposing the silvery white lattice of old scars that covered her wrist. It was a secret she had never shared with anyone. Mrs. Hayes saw the twisted, centipede-like marks and recoiled, snatching her hand back as if she'd been burned. With a steady hand, Madison gently traced the lines on her own skin, her faint smile never wavering. "I never wanted any of this. When I thought I couldn't take another second, this is what I did. It was the only way I could feel like I could still breathe. Do you have any idea what I screamed in my sleep for the last 10 years?" She stared directly into the older woman's horrified, ashen face, articulating every single word with chilling precision. "I was screaming, 'Will somebody please save me?' But I see it clearly now. The only one who can save me is me. Only by being free, by becoming myself again, can I actually start to live." After delivering this quiet declaration, Madison opened the door and walked into the sunlight. This time, no one tried to stop her. But the matriarch's fury, I'm told, was just beginning to simmer. Madison headed straight for a private garage, pulling a dusty tarp off a cherry red convertible that hadn't seen the light of day in years. She slammed her foot on the gas, the engine roaring to life as she peeled out onto the main road. In what can only be described as a moment of pure cinematic fate, she tore through an intersection and smashed head-on into a sleek black Maybach. The license plate was a custom design from the Hayes Automotive Group. It was, of course, Ryan's car. A man I now know to be Ryan's longtime assistant, Tyler, scrambled out of the passenger seat. Madison simply lowered her window. When Tyler saw who was behind the wheel, his jaw went slack. Mrs. Hayes. Madison wasn't surprised. In 5 years, everyone in Ryan's orbit had come to know her as gentle, quiet, and utterly serene. A woman like that, suddenly going full throttle in a muscle car, was an image that simply didn't compute. She offered no explanation. She just handed him a business card from her wallet. If there's any damage, have him call my insurance manager. Then, sliding on a pair of sunglasses, she revved the engine and sped away, leaving him standing there completely dumbfounded before he returned to the Maybach. "Mr. Hayes," he stammered. "The other driver." It was Mrs. Hayes. Ryan, who had been rubbing his temples in the back seat, just murmured coolly, "Let's go." He sounded as if it made no difference whether the person who hit his car was a total stranger or the woman he was married to. Tyler, knowing his boss, wisely shut his mouth. But no one could have imagined that just 3 hours later, this estranged couple would meet again. This time, the setting was a private racetrack, tucked away in the suburbs. Ryan was there to close a major land development deal with a business partner. As it happened, a high-stakes race was in full swing, the sound electric. A single red sports car was dominating the field, its speed and handling simply in another league, easily clinching the championship. When the driver finally stepped out of the vehicle, a stunned silence fell over the gathered spectators. The driver was clad in a form-fitting crimson racing suit that accentuated a lean, powerful figure, instantly capturing the crowd's full attention. Even Ryan, I'm told, had a distinct glimmer of admiration in his eyes. And then the driver pulled off the helmet, revealing a face he knew all too well. Tyler, standing beside him, audibly gasped. "Mr. Hayes. Mrs. Hayes is an incredible race car driver." Ryan said nothing. He just watched as the men all around them stared, their gazes fixed on Madison with a fervent interest he'd never seen directed at her before. His brow furrowed almost imperceptibly. Madison had clocked Ryan's presence ages ago, but gave no sign of recognition. For years, they had an unspoken rule. Unless it was a mandatory high society function, they were to act like strangers in public. It was his preference, and she had always complied. So, when the out-of-town race organizer approached to make introductions, Madison played her part in their silent charade to perfection. She extended a gloved hand politely. "Mr. Hayes, it's a pleasure to finally meet you in person." Ryan's face remained a blank mask, his silence stretching the moment into an awkward standoff. Just then, another voice cut through the tension. "Ryan, are you done here? If so, let's head back to the office for lunch. I'm really craving that seafood chowder your housekeeper makes." Madison turned to see Jessica stepping out of the Maybach. She walked right up to Ryan, looping her arm through his as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Perhaps deciding Madison posed no real threat, Jessica even shot her a tiny, victorious smirk. As the two of them walked off, someone in the crowd murmured, Mr. Hayes even brings his wife to his business meetings. They must be so deeply in love. Ryan's assistant, Tyler, who was still lingering, shot Madison a look that was thick with pity. She knew exactly what was behind it. What a pathetic woman. Can't even keep her own husband interested. She said nothing, simply turning on her heel and leaving the racetrack behind. The very first thing she did was call her lawyer. How long until the divorce certificate is finalized? 7 days, the lawyer confirmed. 7 more days. She had survived 10 years under the Hayes' thumb. She figured 7 days was a walk in the park. She could wait. But just as she was collecting her thoughts, her phone buzzed with another call. It was Tyler, Ryan's assistant. Mrs. Hayes, the CEO is asking when the seafood chowder will be delivered to the office, he continued. Also, Liam's teacher called. She said she couldn't get a hold of you. His craft project for school wasn't brought in this morning. She was wondering if you could drop it off. A memory flickered in Madison's mind. The night before she'd asked Ryan for the divorce, she had been at the dining table, painstakingly following a video tutorial to sew a handmade project for their son. When she'd stormed out of the house, it was sitting there, only half finished. She looked up at the clouds moving freely across the sky and replied with detached calm, "Tell Ryan there is no more seafood chowder. There will never be any again. As for Liam's affairs, I am no longer involved. Do not contact me again." She then blocked the assistant's number without a moment's hesitation. Another tie methodically severed. Inside the CEO's office at Hayes Tower, Tyler held his phone with a look of pure dread. "Sir?" Mrs. Hayes hung up on me. When I tried to call back, it went straight to voicemail. I think she blocked my number. Maybe you should try calling her." Ryan frowned, and in a move that was highly out of character, he actually took out his own phone. He found the contact simply labeled wife and typed out a message. "What's this tantrum about?" A second later, a red notification popped up beneath his text. The system message read, "This person has enabled friend verification. You are not their friend yet. Please send a friend request to chat." Tyler, leaning over to see, happened to glimpse the message history. The last message received was a birthday dinner invitation from Madison, sent a week ago. He couldn't stop himself from blurting out, "Oh, Mrs. Hayes's birthday is the same day as Miss Lee's. So, yesterday was her birthday, too?" "Sir," he asked tentatively, "did you get her a gift?" There was a long pause before Ryan replied flatly, "I wasn't aware." Tyler wasn't the least bit surprised. After all, Madison had sent several messages about it, and Ryan hadn't answered a single one. Before Tyler could comment further, Ryan instructed, "Get her a supplementary birthday gift. You can take care of the arrangements." "Yes, sir." Tyler nodded. But when he looked up, Ryan was already completely absorbed in a financial report, as if the instruction had been a minor administrative task he'd already forgotten. Sighing under his breath, Tyler slipped out to pick something out. That evening, Madison was surprised to receive the gift sent by Ryan's assistant. She refused it without even looking at it. Honestly, she couldn't fathom what Ryan was thinking. Her birthday had already passed. What was the purpose of a gift now? Besides, for the last 10 years, her one and only birthday wish had been the same: freedom. By agreeing to the divorce, Ryan had, in his own detached way, finally given her that gift. Madison had assumed that during the 7-day waiting period, she and Ryan would finally have no reason to interact. But shortly after the assistant left, her phone lit up with a text from her mother-in-law. "Madison, I don't care what little divorce drama you're manufacturing with Ryan, but as long as you are not officially divorced, my grandson will not be affected by this nonsense in any way." Madison let out a humorless scoff. How could their son, Liam, possibly be affected? Ryan was the one who proposed the divorce in the first place. Before she could formulate a reply, a second text landed. "If you don't want this to get ugly, you will come to the family estate this weekend and spend time with my grandson, as usual." Madison recalled how much Ryan detested having too many people around, which is why, after their wedding, they had moved from the sprawling Hayes family estate in Greenwich to a sterile penthouse in Manhattan. After Liam was born, they'd fallen into a standing weekend routine of bringing him back to the Greenwich compound. Today was Friday. On any other Friday, she would have already collected Liam from his preschool and been packing for the trip. Ryan was perpetually busy, rarely getting home before 10 at night. This time, however, Madison drove straight to the estate alone. To her complete shock, when she walked inside, Ryan was already there. My source tells me she tried to sidestep him on the grand staircase, just brushed past him like he was a ghost. But Ryan Hayes wasn't having it. He physically moved to block her way, his presence a sudden, solid wall. And then he asked this bizarre question, my source said. Something like, "Did you like the birthday gift?" Madison just stared at him, completely baffled. The question hung in the air, thick with unspoken history. As far as she knew, she'd already refused it. But, of course, he wouldn't know that. He'd perfected the art of looking right through her for years. So, not wanting to engage, she gave a tight, almost imperceptible nod. That's when he dropped the other shoe. "Tyler is carving a wooden charm for Jessica. I've set it up for you to go upstairs and help him finish it." And there it was. The gift wasn't a gift at all. It was a task, another thread in the web. A source close to Madison said a cold, hollow laugh escaped her then. Without another word, she deliberately shoved her shoulder past his and marched upstairs. Ryan's brow reportedly furrowed, a flicker of something unreadable on his face. But he let her go. Upstairs, the scene was one of intense focus. Her son, Tyler, was hunched over a desk, a small carving knife moving with intense concentration. As Madison approached, the story goes, she saw two wooden charms on the desk. One was already finished, a beautifully crafted good luck charm. He was meticulously trying to duplicate it. The sound of her footsteps must have broken his concentration. He glanced up, and the moment his eyes landed on her, he snatched the finished charm from the table, his movements swift and defensive. His mouth drew into a thin, unhappy line. "Mom, this is the one Dad carved for Aunt Jessica. You can't take it." My source described the impact of those words as a physical blow, a blade twisting in Madison's heart. It was a moment of stunning cruelty from the one person she had poured her life into. To be seen as a common thief by the child she loved more than anything, it was devastating. Staring at Tyler's face, a perfect miniature copy of Ryan's, she felt the air leave her lungs, the tightness in her chest becoming unbearable. "You don't need to be so protective," she finally managed to say, her voice strained. "I have never wanted a single thing that belongs to someone else. Besides, your father and I are getting a divorce soon. Your precious Aunt Jessica will be your new mother before you know it." It was then that Ryan's voice cut through the tension from behind her, cold and sharp. "Madison, what kind of garbage are you feeding him? Are you even a fit mother?" It was, I'm told, the longest sentence he had spoken directly to her in months. Madison turned slowly, taking in the cold indifference on his face, and offered a faint, tired smile. "You're right. I'm not a fit mother, so you should find him one who is." With that final, weary admission, she moved towards the door. But Ryan lunged forward, his hand clamping around her arm, his voice a low warning. In that exact moment, a cheerful chime came from Tyler's smartwatch. He lit up. "Dad, it's Aunt Jessica on a video call." In the next instant, Ryan's grip on her arm vanished. Madison watched, a hollow feeling spreading through her, as he walked to his son, the icy mask on his face melting into a warm smile for the screen. It was in that stark contrast, my source says, that she felt a profound, crushing sense of defeat. Without a backward glance, she walked to the guest room, shut the door, and turned the lock. The room was cold, and though it was June, she felt like she was being sealed in a tomb, buried deep in the frozen earth. She closed her eyes, seeking the oblivion of sleep, only to be thrown into a dream of her 16-year-old self, weeping over the puppy they took away. Ryan was allergic to fur, they'd said. So, the future Mrs. Hayes couldn't have a dog. Then the dream shifted, and she was 19, shipped off by her father to a finishing school in Switzerland, a place designed to polish girls into perfect corporate wives. She'd been at the top of her class, with a guaranteed acceptance to Yale waiting for her. But instead, she was locked behind iron gates, learning flower arranging. In the dream, both her younger selves were crying, pleading with her, "Madison, keep walking forward. Don't you dare look back." And she knew she wouldn't. From the second she served Ryan those divorce papers, she was ready to watch her old life burn to ash. If her future was just more of this gilded cage, she would rather not have one at all. Her sleep was a chaotic mess of these old ghosts. But her internal clock, trained by a decade of servitude, still woke her at 5 in the morning. In her previous life, this was when she would rise to make breakfast for Ryan and Tyler. She warmed a glass of milk, rubbing her temples, the memory of her mother-in-law's last threat echoing in her mind as she went downstairs. But the kitchen was empty. A note on the counter informed her that Ryan and Tyler had already left for the day. They had gone with Jessica to watch the sunrise from the coast. A bitter laugh escaped Madison's lips. It was painfully clear to anyone paying attention that Tyler didn't need her as a mother. Yet, the Hayes family matriarch had insisted she return to the estate. It was clear she was never seen as the lady of the house, merely a placeholder. She was simply required to occupy the space a wife was supposed to fill, a beautiful but silent piece of decoration. After she finally escaped that weekend, her friend Chloe immediately arranged a distraction: a trip to a local university to watch the college baseball team practice. "You need a serious de-stress," Chloe had insisted. The 18-year-old athletes were all charm, calling her mom and showering her with a kind of simple, uncomplicated attention she hadn't felt in years. After a few days in the sun, surrounded by youthful energy, Madison's mood began to lift. Chloe was ecstatic. "See? Now that you've been around some decent young guys, doesn't that old man Ryan seem totally not worth it anymore?" Madison smiled, a genuine smile this time. "Yes," she admitted quietly. "I don't love him anymore." Seeing her friend finally break through, Chloe became even more animated. "That's what I've been telling you for years. You should have divorced him ages ago. Any one of these guys would treat you better than that cold fish. You should find a nice, sweet younger guy and just live your best life." Madison was about to laugh and agree when a quiet cough sounded from just behind them. She turned. It was Ryan, his assistant David standing nervously beside him, looking like he wanted to be anywhere else. David looked agitated, but Ryan was just a silhouette against the afternoon light. his face impossible to read. But then she reminded herself his face was almost always a blank slate when he looked at her. Madison turned back, pretending she hadn't seen him, and started to lead Chloe away. She fully expected him to let her walk, but to her astonishment, he closed the distance between them and took her by the arm. "There's a gathering you need to be at. You're coming with me." He didn't wait for an answer, simply steered her toward his waiting car. Once inside, she felt completely disoriented. According to my sources, Ryan had treated her like thin air for the better part of a decade. This sudden, forceful possessiveness was something she'd only ever experienced behind the closed doors of their bedroom. As she tried to process the whiplash, he spoke again, his voice low. "Madison, for families like ours, isn't suitability the most important thing?" It took her a beat to understand he was directly responding to what he'd overheard her and Chloe discussing. So, love was irrelevant. Being cared for didn't factor in. A bitter, sharp laugh broke from her lips, and for the first time in a very long time, she turned and leveled a truly cold glare at him. "But your suitability is built entirely on my silent suffering. And what exactly gives you the right to demand that, Ryan?" He just stared at her for a few long, heavy seconds, offering nothing in response. Madison, I'm told, was done trying to decipher his silences. She simply closed her eyes and pretended to sleep. When they pulled up to a private club, she realized it was an intimate get-together with his closest friends. It was telling that he'd never once brought her to this kind of informal event. Madison had never liked his circle. She knew they saw her as nothing more than a pretty, placid doll. So she kept her expression unreadable all evening, nursing a small glass of wine. Feeling a little dizzy later, she excused herself to find the restroom. After she was gone, one of Ryan's friends leaned in, a smirk on his face. "Ryan, your wife didn't smile once all night. In fact, she looked right through you. Those rumors about you two getting a divorce must have some truth to them." Ryan slowly swirled the red wine in his glass, his eyes on the vortex. "Who said anything about a divorce? Since the day I married her, my wife for this lifetime can only be Madison Vance." His friend looked genuinely shocked. "Are you serious?" Ryan just gave him a look that shut down any further questions. The friend, looking completely baffled, eventually tried another angle. "Ryan, you remember that tech CEO, Grant, the one you partnered with? He was just like you. Ignored his wife completely. No one even knew who she was. After a while, she just got fed up and left him. I hear he's still trying to get her back. If you're really serious about spending your life with Madison, you might want to start showing it, or you'll end up just like him." The hand Ryan was using to swirl his wine glass reportedly paused for just a fraction of a second. Then, with absolute certainty, he said, "She wouldn't." At that very same moment, in the quiet of the club's restroom, Madison's phone buzzed. It was a text from her lawyer. "Miss Vance, the divorce certificate for you and Mr. Ryan Hayes has been processed. It is ready for pickup at your convenience." The day she had only dreamed of had finally arrived. She immediately left the club, hailed a cab to the law firm, and collected the piece of paper that represented her freedom. She opened it right there on the street, reading the words over and over. From this second forward, she no longer had to treat Ryan's words as law. She no longer had to live by the stifling rules of the Hayes family. No more bland, steamed vegetables to maintain the elegance of Mrs. Hayes. No more wearing the same neutral makeup every day, smiling at people she despised, and lying about how happy she was. She could go bungee jumping, she could go racing, she could travel the world. The possibilities were dizzying. Leaving the law firm, Chloe declared that to properly celebrate her liberation, their first stop had to be for a meal the former Mrs. Hayes would never have been allowed to touch. She drove Madison to a row of food trucks buzzing with life in a crowded night market. Milkshakes, barbecue, ice cream. Eat whatever you want, Chloe told her, breathing in the rich, smoky air, thick with the smell of grilled meat and spices. Madison, for the first time in a decade, felt truly, vibrantly alive. That night, my source says, they ate greasy skewers, drank cheap beer, and danced right there on the sidewalk, their laughter loud and completely free. Eventually, Madison's laughter dissolved into tears, the weight of 10 long years finally breaking apart. Perhaps it was because she had been silenced for so long that the pain needed a voice. Fueled by alcohol and newfound freedom, she took out her phone, unblocked Tyler's number, and dialed. The second the call connected, she spoke, her eyes red and raw with unshed tears. "Tyler," she said, her voice shaking but clear, "I want you to know, even if you don't like me, I am your biological mother, the one who almost died on a delivery table to bring you into this world. That was me, model." From what I've gathered, the phone call that unraveled Ryan Thompson's life was shockingly direct. His wife, Madison, her voice stripped of all warmth, delivered a verdict. "I was the one who stayed up with you through every fever, every sickness. And the moment you chose to call me cruel for an outsider like Chloe, you stopped being my husband. And I stopped being your son's mother. You don't get to call me by that name anymore. You haven't earned it." Through the receiver, my source tells me Ryan's voice was pure ice. "Madison, what are you talking about?" I'm told Madison paused, a bitter realization dawning on her that their son was likely in the room. Her tone shifted to a chilling formality. "Mr. Thompson, instead of wasting your time lecturing me, perhaps you should invest it in teaching your son some basic decency. Are you aware that on the eve of my birthday, your child told me to divorce you so Chloe could take my place?" It was, funnily enough, the most complete sentence he has ever spoken to me. "So, congratulations, Ryan. I am giving all of you exactly what you wished for." With that, the line went dead. She had blocked his number again. After a long night, fueled by sorrow and vodka with her best friend Jessica, Madison booked a one-way ticket out of the country. She knew her actions were extreme, but she also knew that once word of the divorce got out, her own influential family would never let her be. The fear was that they'd try to force her back, to make her plead with Ryan for a second chance, or even worse, they might broker another deal, marrying her off to the next highest bidder. She had to escape New York, this time for good. After a tearful goodbye with Jessica, Madison grabbed a single small suitcase and walked toward the front door, only to be stopped cold. Parked just down the curb was the unmistakable silhouette of a black Maybach. Ryan emerged from the car, holding their son Tyler by the hand, and strode toward her. "Tyler, apologize to your mother." The boy, his face ashen, clutched his father's pant leg and gave a stiff, rehearsed bow. "Mom, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I did. I shouldn't have wished for you and Dad to get a divorce. I know it was wrong. Can you please forgive me?" Madison let out a small, tired laugh. There's no need for an apology. She had already unleashed all her hurt and anger. There was nothing left inside but an empty calm. But what happened next was something she and anyone who knew Ryan Thompson would have thought impossible. He spoke. "I apologize. I didn't raise him properly. This is my failure, too. It was a miracle hearing those words from him, but a single sorry couldn't mend years of quiet neglect. Still, Madison remembered the small package in her bag, the one she'd intended to mail to him from the airport. She looked him in the eye and said, "Ryan, if you genuinely mean that, then give me a ride to the airport." A flicker of confusion crossed his face. "The family has no overseas business scheduled. Where are you going?" Madison's smile was pure irony. "So, I'm not allowed a life of my own outside of the Thompson family business." He stammered, "That's not what I meant." For the briefest of moments, Ryan looked completely flustered, but she had stopped caring. It was Ryan who had driven her to their wedding, delivering her to the gilded cage of the Thompson family. It seemed only right that he be the one to drive her away, to witness the final severing of their ties. The drive to JFK was heavy with a silence that words couldn't break. Before stepping out, Madison handed him a beautifully wrapped box. "A parting gift," my source says. Ryan paused, unsettled by her phrasing, but he accepted it. "Thank you." Little Tyler looked up, his face full of a child's hope. "What about me, Mommy?" Madison's smile was gentle. "Yours is in there as well. It's a gift for the both of you, actually. It should make you very happy." She then added a strange condition. "Just don't open it for 1 hour. By that point, my flight will be in the air." In a rare display of softness, Ryan even managed to say, "Come back soon." She offered only a quiet smile in return, before turning her back on him and her old life. She was walking toward her freedom. Ryan stood there, watching her elegant form vanish into the bustling terminal, a strange and unfamiliar dread coiling in his stomach. He clutched the box, fighting the sudden, intense urge to tear it open right there, but Tyler stopped him. "Daddy, we made a promise to Mom. We have to wait for 1 hour." For the next 60 minutes, Ryan sat with a financial report in his lap. Though not a single word registered, his eyes kept darting to the gift box. At last, the hour was up. Tyler reached for it excitedly. "Daddy, what did Mommy give us that's so secret?" With a soft click, the lid popped open. Ryan glanced over just as his son peered inside. There, nestled on a cushion of white silk, was a single official document. A certificate of divorce. Tyler, despite being only 3, was already in advanced tutoring. He looked at the paper in the box, his little lips forming the words he was sounding out. He finally looked up at his father. "Daddy, what is a divorce certificate? Mommy said this was our gift." A deafening roar filled Ryan's head. He threw the report aside and shot to his feet, his elbow catching a cup of coffee. The warm liquid soaked into the leg of his custom suit, but he didn't even notice the dark, spreading stain. His entire world had narrowed to the box in his son's hands. He wasn't even aware that his own hands were shaking violently. The small crimson booklet lay there, quiet and modest, much like the woman whose presence in his home had been a constant he had so often and so deliberately overlooked. A wave of immense, suffocating panic crashed over him. He knew with gut-wrenching certainty that if he opened that document, a part of his life would be gone forever. As a titan of industry, Ryan Thompson was legendary for his unshakable calm. In that moment, however, he completely fell apart. With a trembling hand, he picked up the small booklet. It took him several ragged breaths before he could bring himself to flip it open. The second he saw his name printed next to Madison's, his sharp, dark eyes widened in sheer disbelief. He couldn't process it. He was divorced. His first instinct was to call her, but he remembered with a jolt of fury. She was on a plane, unreachable. An impotent rage surged through him. He fought the urge to charter a jet and chase her down, to demand she explain this madness. Instead, he called his assistant. Find out Mrs. Thompson's full itinerary. I need to know her final destination. And then I need you to arrange for her immediate return. And find out who processed this divorce. There was no agreement, no court date. His voice was laced with a raw panic he didn't recognize as his own. He was never this emotional. On the other end of the line, his assistant, David, was practically trembling. In all his years serving Ryan Thompson, he'd never heard this tone, not even when a rival's move cost them billions. And this was all because of the quiet, unassuming Mrs. Thompson. David shook his head, baffled, but simply said, "Yes, sir," and began the frantic work. Ryan paced his cavernous study, the sense of dread tightening its grip with every step. Finally, he grabbed his phone and sent a friend request to the woman who had cut him off. "What is this divorce certificate? You're a grown woman. Why are you playing this kind of childish prank? Message me the moment you land. Tyler and I are sick with worry." He paused, then typed again, his tone shifting. "Whatever the issue is, we can sit down and discuss it. We can communicate. There's no reason for something this drastic. You're a mother now, not some child." Every message was met with a profound, echoing silence. Ryan finally collapsed into his leather chair, pinching the bridge of his nose, utterly exhausted. Nearby, Tyler, who had been building with blocks, looked up with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, does this gift mean you and Mommy are divorced?" The words, a stark echo of his son's earlier cruelty, hit Ryan like a physical blow. A lump formed in his throat, a crushing weight settling on his chest. After a long, agonizing moment, he whispered to the empty room, perhaps to himself, "Madison, have you really just given up on me?" The waiting was torture. "Hasn't the plane landed yet, Madison? Where on earth did you go?" Ryan had no idea how many times he checked his watch or how many unanswered messages he had sent. A strange feeling of indignation began to bubble up inside him. He and Madison had been perfectly suited for each other. They had coexisted peacefully for 5 years. Why would she suddenly detonate their life and leave without a single word? He suddenly recalled the cold finality in her voice on the phone yesterday, and a cold sweat broke out across his forehead. Just then, his phone buzzed to life. He snatched it up, answering without even checking the caller ID. "Madison, you finally called me back. I've sent you so many messages. Why haven't you responded?" The voice on the other end was quiet for a few beats before replying. "Sir, it's me." Ryan glanced at the screen. The small flicker of hope he'd felt was instantly extinguished. He rubbed his temples, his voice low and defeated. "Sorry, I was distracted. What did you find? Do you have any news about Mrs. Thompson?" David chose his words with extreme care. "Well, sir, we've confirmed Mrs. Thompson boarded a flight to Europe this morning. However, after her initial landing, we lost her trail. Her connecting flights are masked, so we cannot determine her final destination." His voice became progressively quieter. Ryan's expression was like a thundercloud. After a long pause, he asked hoarsely, "And the divorce certificate? What did you find out about that?" David, on the other end, nodded, before remembering Ryan couldn't see him. "Yes, we investigated, sir. The divorce agreement was signed by you, personally. Our legal department, along with an independent forensics team, has verified the signature and the document's contents. They report no issues. The control Ryan had been desperately clinging to finally snapped. His voice was glacial. What do you mean, no issues? David was startled, then carefully explained. In the agreement, sir, Mrs. Thompson made no claim on any of your assets. She has, in essence, left with nothing. All marital property, including her significant shares and real estate holdings, has been transferred into a trust fund for Master Tyler. She specified that this was to be considered her full payment of child support. She didn't want your money, sir. And she relinquished all custody of Master Tyler. David was sweating through his shirt. He had witnessed his fair share of high society scandals, but he had never seen a wealthy wife execute such a surgically clean exit. Most would drag things out for years, fighting over every last dime. But Mrs. Thompson, she just walked away. He couldn't tell if it was because she truly didn't care about the fortune or if she felt utterly powerless against it. As David was lost in these thoughts, the line went dead. Ryan had hung up. From what I've pieced together, it all began in the silence of his mahogany-paneled study. Ryan Hayes, a man who thought he had the world on a string, was gripping his phone, the words he just heard from his wife Madison echoing in the cavernous room. A perfect life, a stable marriage, or, so he believed, had just been dismantled in a single phone call. After a minute that stretched into an eternity, he whispered to no one, "Madison, what was so wrong?" That's when the door swung open, and his young son, Tyler, came wandering in, oblivious. The little boy wrapped his arms around Ryan's leg, his eyes shining with a strange, unnerving hope. A source close to the family told me the words that came out of his mouth next were what truly started the avalanche. "Daddy," he asked, "Aunt Chloe said the divorce papers mean I get a new mommy, right? Can you please marry Aunt Chloe? I really want her to be my new mommy." Ryan had always brushed off these comments as innocent childhood fantasies, but now, in the ruins of his marriage, they sounded like an indictment. Could this be it? Could Madison have left him over their own son's bizarre fixation? He frowned, his voice harsher than he intended. "You're only 3 years old, Tyler. What could you possibly know about any of this? Don't you ever say that again. You have one mother and that's it. No new mother." The sudden severity in his father's tone was too much for the little boy. His face crumpled and he began to sob, his small voice wailing, "I want a new mommy. I want Aunt Chloe." "I don't want my old mommy," Tyler cried. "She's just like a nanny. She's never any fun." That's when the anger inside Ryan finally ignited. He scooped his son up, his hand connecting with a light but firm smack on his bottom. "Who taught you to say these things?" he demanded. It was a terrible, dawning realization. Tyler was only 3. He couldn't have come up with concepts like divorce or nanny on his own. Someone had been poisoning his mind. The tap wasn't hard, but Tyler reacted with the drama of a child who feels deeply betrayed. He squirmed out of Ryan's arms and bolted from the study. "I hate you, Daddy. If you don't get me a new mommy, I'm going to run away." Exasperated, Ryan moved to follow him, but his phone buzzed again. The screen read, "Chloe." For a fateful second, he paused, and in that moment of hesitation, he chose to answer the call rather than chase after his son. When he picked up, Chloe's voice was a soft, calculated caress. "Ryan, I heard from Tyler that you and Madison are getting a divorce. What's happening? Surely it's just a child's misunderstanding, isn't it?" Ryan let out a heavy sigh. "It's a misunderstanding," he lied, trying to maintain some semblance of control. We are not divorcing. Was there something else you needed? A beat of silence hung on the line before her voice returned, laced with disappointment. No, not really, she said. It's just, we were all supposed to take Tyler to the amusement park for the fireworks tonight. I hadn't heard anything from you or Madison, so I wanted to check in. A pang of guilt hit Ryan. He'd completely forgotten. I'm sorry, Chloe. I forgot. We'll have to do it another time. But by the time the call ended, Tyler was nowhere to be found. At first, Ryan wasn't worried. It was a sprawling penthouse apartment with a full staff. How could anyone misplace a 3-year-old? Yet, somehow, Tyler had simply evaporated. My investigation showed that not a single person saw him leave. The building's state-of-the-art security system captured only a fleeting, ghostly image of a small boy walking out the front door, all alone. Ryan unleashed every resource at his disposal, turning the city inside out. But there was absolutely no sign of Tyler. He frantically dialed Madison's number over and over, only to be met by a cold, automated voice. The number you have dialed has been switched off. In a final, desperate act, he had his assistant track down the number for Madison's best friend, Jessica. Hello, this is Ryan Hayes, he began, his voice strained. Have you heard from Madison? If you speak to her, you need to tell her that because of this divorce she wanted so badly, Tyler is missing. If she has a single maternal bone left in her body, he continued, she'll come back right now. Before he could say more, Jessica's voice, loud and furious, cut through the line like a buzzsaw. Whoa, hold on a minute. Your son is missing, so you call the police. What do you expect Madison to do? Use a psychic hotline to find him? This is on you, Ryan. Don't you dare pin this on her. You and that woman pushed her to this. She should have left you and your spoiled, rotten son years ago. The line went dead with a sharp click, leaving Ryan stunned. But it rang again almost instantly. It was Chloe. Ryan answered and was met with a storm of panicked screams. Ryan, help me! Someone's trying to take Tyler. Let go of him. Tyler, honey, don't be scared. Aunt Chloe is here. Watch out. Then, nothing. The call was cut. My sources confirmed that Ryan immediately had his security team trace Chloe's phone, racing to a desolate stretch of highway miles from the city. There, on a muddy embankment, they found them. Chloe and Tyler, both unconscious. Chloe was a wreck, covered in dirt and bruises, a portrait of heroic struggle. But Tyler, held protectively in her arms, was perfectly fine, save for a smudge of dirt on his cheek. It was a moving scene, a testament to a woman's love. But as Ryan stood there, watching the chaos, his hands hanging limp at his sides, slowly curled into tight, white-knuckled fists. He ordered them both into an ambulance. As he watched the flashing lights recede into the night, he finally turned to his assistant, David. Investigate Chloe, he said, his voice flat and cold. I want to know everything she's done recently, every person she's talked to. I don't want a single detail missed. David looked at him, confused for a moment, and then a flicker of understanding crossed his face. He'd been with Ryan all night as they searched the entire city without a single lead. How did the seemingly frail Chloe just happen to stumble upon him? And how does a 3-year-old manage to slip out of a fully staffed, high-security penthouse? If this was a legitimate abduction, where was the ransom call? Why just dump them on the side of the road? Ryan Hayes hadn't built his empire by being a fool. The narrative was riddled with holes too glaring to ignore. It didn't take long. Soon, a file landed on Ryan's desk containing irrefutable proof that Chloe had orchestrated the entire kidnapping. He sat with that file for a long time, his face an unreadable mask, an icy calm settling over him. "Withdraw the police report," he commanded. "This never happened. Destroy this evidence. I don't want a third person knowing anything about this." "The official story is that Chloe saved Tyler?" David asked, his voice full of disbelief. Was his boss really going to protect the woman who had staged his own son's abduction? But before he could process the command, Ryan was already gone, striding down the sterile white corridor of the hospital. When he walked into the private room, Chloe was propped against the pillows, looking pale and beautifully fragile. She saw him and coughed weakly, a deliberate, theatrical sound, shifting just enough to show off the dark bruises on her arm. "Ryan," she whispered with manufactured concern. "How's Tyler? Is he okay? He's so young. This must have been absolutely terrifying for him. It's all Madison's fault. Just abandoning her own child like that. What kind of mother does that?" she lamented. "I need to go see him." She made a show of struggling to get out of bed. But as she moved past him, Ryan's hand shot out and grabbed her arm. His voice was low and devoid of all warmth. "Madison is my wife. Whether or not she is a good mother is not for you or anyone else to judge." Chloe froze, looking up at the hard, unfamiliar lines of his face. The gentle expression he usually reserved for her was gone, replaced by something so cold it was frightening. Her palms began to sweat. "Ryan," she said, her voice softening into a wounded quiver. "After everything we've been through, how can you call me others? I was just worried. I misspoke. But this kidnapping, it was so horrible. I'm still terrified. I've watched Tyler grow up. I can't help but worry about him," she finished, a tear tracing a path down her cheek. Ryan's grip tightened almost imperceptibly, his gaze sharp with cold suspicion. After a long, tense moment, he finally spoke. "If you found it so horrible, so terrifying," he asked quietly, "then why did you arrange for my son to be kidnapped? Why did you stage this entire pathetic charade?" Chloe's pale face went completely slack. She blinked, her expression a perfect mask of bewildered innocence. "Ryan, what are you talking about? I don't understand." He didn't bother to explain. He just stared at her, his eyes a swirling mix of disappointment and disgust. "I've already taken care of the evidence for you," he said calmly. "From this moment on, you will stay away from my son. I'm sending you abroad. You'll be provided for the rest of your life. But you're never to come back." He turned to walk away, but she scrambled from the bed and threw her arms around his waist, clinging to him. "Ryan, please, don't send me away. If I did something wrong, I can fix it. We've known each other for so many years. I can't live without you." He remained perfectly still, methodically prying her fingers from his shirt. Chloe's voice grew shrill with desperation. "Ryan, why? I admit I was reckless, but you and Madison are divorced. I just want to marry the man I love. What's so wrong with that? I don't even care that Tyler isn't my real son. I swear I'll be a good mother to him." He finally broke her grip, his brow furrowed in genuine disbelief. "The man you love? The man you love?" he repeated slowly. "Isn't that my late older brother?" The color drained from Chloe's face. Her lips trembled. What are you talking about? The person I have always loved is you. For all these years, you've been the one by my side, taking care of me. You remember my birthday when I don't. You're always there for me, no matter what." "You treat me better than you treat your own wife," she insisted. "Don't you love me?" My sources say that in that moment, something inside Ryan finally broke. He took a physical step back from her. I took care of you because it was my brother's dying wish, he stated, his voice flat. I have no romantic feelings for you. I will never marry you. The private jet will be ready this afternoon. You need to be on it. And without a single backward glance, Ryan Hayes walked out of the hospital and out of her life. Meanwhile, half a world away in Finland, Madison knew nothing of the chaos she'd left behind. She had secured a residency permit and enrolled at a local university, finally free to pursue the dream she had been forced to set aside years ago, to become a diplomatic translator. Before her classes began, she took the money she had carefully saved over the years and bought a small, simple house. She'd been told that from its windows, you could sometimes see the northern lights dancing in the winter sky. She was looking forward to the solitude, to a life where her time was finally her own. She began teaching herself Finnish and signed up for electives in German, Japanese, and Spanish, building a new world, one word at a time. From what I've been able to piece together, Madison's second year in Finland was a turning point. She landed a spot in a highly competitive program for international students, a track that, within 3 years, could place her in the embassy as a career diplomat. The intense focus required for her studies became a refuge, allowing the life she'd left behind to fade. Her marriage to Ryan Hayes started to feel like a story someone else had told her, a distant, hazy memory. In this new world, she wasn't the young Mrs. Hayes, a society wife trapped in a gilded cage. She wasn't defined as Ryan's wife or Tyler's mother. Here, she was simply Madison, a whole and sovereign person. The very culture of Finland seemed to breathe new life into her. Unlike back home, there was no rigid, preordained timeline for life. After high school, people didn't just funnel into college and then marriage. They were free to explore, to work, to marry, or to simply be, without judgment. University admissions were held for you, waiting patiently until you were ready to claim them. It was an environment where Madison, older than a typical student, didn't feel out of place. Many of her classmates were her age or even older. During the 4 years she dedicated to her degree, my sources say she experienced a profound sense of liberation and happiness that was entirely new to her. She built a network of genuine friends. In her 5th year abroad, Madison achieved her goal, officially joining the diplomatic corps at the embassy as a translator. What she had no way of knowing was that for 6 long years, Ryan Hayes had been tearing the world apart looking for her. Back in the stark minimalist CEO's office at Hayes Tower, his second in command, Kevin, burst in. His face lit up with a rare, unfiltered excitement. "Sir, we found her. We have confirmation on Mrs. Hayes. She's working at the embassy in Finland." Ryan shot out of his chair, a raw, unadulterated joy cracking through his famously stoic facade. Kevin's eyes went wide. In the entire 6 years since the divorce, he had never seen his boss truly smile. Not even when closing a multi-billion-dollar acquisition had a smile like that ever reached his eyes. Ryan was already moving toward the door before he stopped, turning back with a new fire in his gaze. "I want a complete, up-to-the-minute file on her. Everything. Get it for me now." A powerful wave of euphoria, something he hadn't felt in years, washed over him. Ryan found he couldn't stop the corners of his mouth from curving upward. His eyes landed on the family photograph he kept on his desk. The 3 of them, frozen in a happier time. His finger traced the delicate outline of Madison's face in the picture. "I'll fix this," he vowed to the image. I'll clear up every misunderstanding between us. I am bringing you home. Madison, for her part, never looked for news about Ryan or her son Tyler. She had built a narrative in her mind where they had moved on, finding the wife and mother they had always seemed to want. Her life was a whirlwind of international summits and dense document translations. It was a demanding, fulfilling existence until the day her superior handed her a project proposal in English for a new energy partnership. Madison, you're the sharpest mind we have in this department. This document is a top priority for the Finnish Trade Commission. I need your eyes on it. And I need the translation turned around as quickly as humanly possible. She glanced at the thick binder, the weight of it a familiar challenge, and smiled with genuine confidence. Of course, sir. I'll see it done. These were the moments she lived for now, the high-stakes challenges that others would find daunting. She had spent years sharpening her abilities for exactly this. But as Madison opened the binder, her eyes fell on the cover page and the air left her lungs. The proposal was from Hayes Corp., from Ryan. The name, a ghost from her past, materialized before her. She physically shook her head, drawing a deep, steadying breath, telling herself it was nothing more than a coincidence. Hayes Corp. Was a global titan. It was only logical they would seek to expand their operations into Finland. After several grueling, sleepless nights fueled by caffeine and sheer willpower, Madison delivered the finished translation to her superior's office. He scanned a few pages, his head nodding with growing admiration. This is truly impressive work. Your reputation is well earned. To tackle a document of this magnitude so quickly and with such precision. Madison, you are an invaluable asset to this embassy. She knew her boss. This level of praise was almost always the prelude to a new, even more difficult assignment. Still, the validation felt good. Sir, you can save the flattery, she said, a playful smile touching her lips. Just tell me what you need. Any more compliments and my ego won't fit through the doorway. He let out a hearty laugh. Fair enough, fair enough. The senior delegation from Hayes Corp. Is flying in for a site visit. Our government is rolling out the red carpet for this one. I've already assigned you as the lead diplomatic translator for their visit. And look, it's not all business. I recall you're single, aren't you? The head of their delegation is a brilliant young man, also single. It's a fantastic networking opportunity. It couldn't be Ryan, could it? The thought sent a knot of ice forming in her stomach. The world just isn't that small. When the day came, she stood beside her superior at the airport arrivals gate. Madison, he explained, the Finns are hosting a welcome dinner tonight. It's not meant to be overly formal, so you can afford to be a bit more relaxed with the translation. I'll make the introductions in just a moment. As he spoke, her boss started waving enthusiastically at someone just over her shoulder. Mr. Hayes, over here! He took Madison by the arm and guided her forward. She felt as though she were moving through water, her mind still struggling to process the situation as she came to a stop directly in front of Ryan Hayes. 6 years had passed, but time had been unnervingly kind to him. He was the same man, impassive, quietly intense. Her boss gave her a gentle nudge. Mr. Hayes, I am delighted to introduce you to Miss Madison Vance from our embassy's diplomatic translation division. She will be your dedicated translator for the duration of your trip. Don't let her youthful appearance deceive you. Miss Vance is fluent in 5 languages and is, without question, our most brilliant translator. And she happens to be single. Ryan's entire focus was on Madison, his eyes filled with a complex, searching emotion she couldn't begin to decipher. Madison put on a professional smile and extended her hand, her posture polite, but radiating a clear, professional distance. Mr. Hayes, a pleasure to meet you. Ryan just stared at her for a few beats too long, his expression a complete enigma, before finally enveloping her hand in his. Seeing him was a shock, but Madison's only goal was to navigate the professional pleasantries. She attempted to retract her hand, but his grip remained firm. After a second, more insistent tug, her eyebrows knitted together, and her voice became clipped and cool. Mr. Hayes, what do you think you're doing? Her superior, sensing the sudden charged atmosphere, leaped in with a nervous laugh. The captivating charm of our diplomatic translators is always making an impression. It seems Mr. Hayes is not immune. A shadow crossed Ryan's face. He finally released her hand, and for the first time, the ghost of a smile, or something like it, touched his lips. Indeed, he said softly, letting her go. The dinner commenced, and Madison focused on walling him out of her thoughts. This was a job, nothing more. A temporary professional obligation. He couldn't possibly be here just for her. Centering herself, she took her assigned seat next to him. Finnish is a notoriously difficult language, yet Madison translated with an effortless, fluid precision, conveying Ryan's talking points to their hosts and their nuanced responses back to him. He listened with an unnerving intensity, his legs crossed, the picture of aristocratic control. Finland offers robust policy support in the clean energy sector, and their technological base is world-class. But market entry is contingent on navigating local regulations. We can provide legal guidance and facilitate access to resources. As she spoke his words, Madison paused internally. She realized that in their 5 years of marriage, she had never once heard him speak with this kind of focused, intelligent authority. A sharp pang of bitterness struck her. Not for him, but for the woman she used to be. For the years she spent as a hollowed-out version of herself. But that woman was gone. Ryan's deep voice cut through her thoughts. I need to understand if there are any special requirements concerning Finnish tax codes and labor laws. He spoke deliberately, his gaze landing on her after every sentence. It was a calm, piercing look. Madison instinctively avoided making eye contact, performing her duties with the detached professionalism she had perfected. This was just another assignment, no different from any other she'd handled over the last 6 years. The dinner was, by all accounts, a resounding success. As they were leaving, standing in the middle of a gentle Helsinki snowfall, Madison pulled her scarf tighter around her neck. She shook his gloved hand. Mr. Hayes, it was a pleasure working with you. Goodbye. She turned, her boots making a soft, crunching sound on the pristine snow. She had just reached her car when a voice cut through the quiet night. Madison. She froze, her hand on the door handle, but didn't turn around. She waited. The wind was sharp, making her fingertips ache with cold. Finally, his voice came again, closer this time. Don't you have a single thing you want to say to me? She wasn't sure, but there seemed to be an unfamiliar note of hurt in his strained voice. Madison's heart gave a painful thud. It's just the cold, she told herself. Mr. Hayes, everything that needed to be said tonight was said at the dinner table, and I translated all of it. As for anything personal, I have nothing to say. But Ryan, it seemed, was not going to be dismissed so easily. A new urgency entered his impossibly controlled tone. Madison, when you left without a trace, even if you gave no thought to how I would feel, what about Tyler? It's been 6 years. He's 9 years old now. Don't you miss your son at all? Madison finally turned, a serene, almost placid smile gracing her lips. A child who had zero appreciation for anything his mother did for him? What is there to miss? Besides, I'm sure he's perfectly happy with his new mother by now. Snowflakes began to settle on Ryan's dark overcoat, making his tall frame seem even more isolated against the white landscape. He frowned, a look of what seemed like genuine confusion clouding his features. He sighed, a small puff of white in the freezing air, and took a step toward her. For the first time, his voice was soft, devoid of its usual command. Tyler didn't disregard you, Madison. He was a child. He was just too young to understand how to love. And he does not have a new mother. His mother will only ever be you. That is not and never will be up for debate. Too young to know how to love. Madison's eyes scanned Ryan's face, tracing the strong angle of his jaw down to his thin lips. The very idea was so absurd, it was almost funny. From what she remembered, Ryan and Tyler knew exactly how to remember Chloe's birthday. They knew how to pour time and effort into a thoughtful, handmade gift for her. They knew how to love just fine. They just never knew how to love her. Madison leaned back against the cool metal of her car, studying him as if he were a puzzle. She found herself wondering if she were still Mrs. Ryan Hayes, would he be standing here in the snow, speaking to her with this strange, placating gentleness? She shook her head, a small, self-deprecating smile on her lips. Ryan's brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you laughing at?" Madison met his gaze directly, her smile widening into something unapologetically mocking. My source tells me their final conversation before she left began with a bitter question from Madison. "Don't you laugh when something's funny, Mr. Hayes?" she'd asked, her voice ice. She made it clear that their shared history was a book she had no intention of reopening, telling him she knew nothing about him and wanted to keep it that way. Without giving the powerful Ryan Hayes a chance to respond, she got into her car, slammed the door with a finality that echoed in the quiet garage, and drove away from that life for good. That night, back in the quiet sanctuary of her new home, Madison collapsed into bed, the weight of the encounter settling over her. Seeing Ryan again, my source explained, was like breaking a dam. Memories she had spent 6 years abroad bearing came rushing back. For 5 years, she'd played the role of the perfect corporate wife and doting mother, a version of herself she no longer recognized. Her time away had been a frantic effort to reclaim a youth that had been cut short, to live out the college years she'd sacrificed. In that time, she had managed to forget she was ever anyone's wife, let alone Tyler's mother. But Ryan's sudden appearance had dredged it all up from the depths where she'd left it. She clutched her duvet, and bone-deep weariness pulling her down into a swift, heavy sleep. Later, deep in the night, a neighbor's dog started barking, a frantic sound that tore her from her dreams. The hazy images from her subconscious, Ryan's cold, indifferent face, her son Tyler's sad, tired eyes, shattered and dissolved into the darkness. She took a few steadying breaths, trying to shake the ghost from her mind, and moved toward the window to investigate the noise. And there he was, standing on her doorstep, still wrapped in the same black overcoat from their earlier encounter, was Ryan. How he tracked her to this remote corner of the world was a mystery. But the absurdity of the scene struck her immediately. In the deep freeze of a finished polar night, with the temperature plunging to 20 or 30 degrees below 0 Celsius, he was dangerously underdressed. Madison knew with chilling certainty that if she ignored him, she'd be greeted by a human-shaped ice sculpture in the morning. Despite having no idea what he could possibly want, she unlocked the door and let her ex-husband step inside. A frozen corpse on her property was a complication she absolutely did not need. Once he was thawing by the warmth of the fireplace, she moved with a detached politeness, handing him a mug of fresh coffee. His knuckles were a blotchy, painful red, and a violent shiver racked his entire frame. He wrapped his frozen hands around the warm ceramic, a long moment passing before he seemed capable of speech. When he finally looked up, he offered a smile so weak it barely registered. "Thank you," he murmured. Madison's gaze didn't soften. A genuine smile from Ryan had always been a rare, almost startling event. His default expression was a cool, unreadable mask. Her own expression hardened, and her voice was sharp when she finally spoke. "Ryan, what on earth do you want?" He lowered his gaze, and the frost that had gathered on his eyelashes began to melt, forming a single perfect droplet that clung to the tips, lending him a look of startling vulnerability. As his lashes trembled, the drop fell. When he spoke again, his voice was thin, almost lost to the cold. "I need to know why we got divorced." Madison could only stare at him. He met her gaze, and what she saw there wasn't malice or manipulation, but a profound and genuine confusion that sent a wave of conflicting emotions through her. It was confirmation of her worst fear. The 5 years of quiet suffering she had endured had been so insignificant to him, they hadn't even registered. A deep sigh escaped her, filled with regret for ever opening the door. She should have just killed the lights and let him freeze. Her throat felt impossibly tight. After a long, tense silence, 2 words she'd almost never heard from him emerged, feeling foreign and strange in the quiet room. "Madison." It was almost comical. The first time her husband had ever really used her first name was 6 years after he'd signed the divorce papers. She pulled a thick blanket tighter around her shoulders and sank into an armchair, her eyes glinting with a dark, painful irony. "Ryan," she began, her voice steady, "has it never once occurred to you that the reason you don't know why we divorced is the reason we got divorced?" Ryan's posture went rigid, the confusion on his face deepening. This was him to a T. His elite background, his meteoric career, his razor-sharp intellect. They equipped him to manage empires, but left him utterly indifferent to the quiet emotions of the people around him. It was as if he operated under the assumption that the world and everyone in it would simply run on the tracks he'd laid down. Madison, it seemed, was one of the only derailments he'd ever known. A sudden burning sensation pricked at the back of her eyes. She shifted in her seat, swallowing hard against the lump forming in her throat. "Ryan, before I left, I told you why, many times. I said," she continued, her voice gaining strength, "that since you and Tyler both seem to adore Chloe so much, I would agree to a divorce. I told you I would give up custody of our son and walk away with absolutely nothing. Our shared assets," I said, "could be transferred into Tyler's name, a final gift from the mother he barely knew. I spelled it all out for you, word for word." She leaned forward, pinning him with her gaze. "But Ryan, do you remember a single second of it?" Ryan's hands clenched around the now lukewarm mug. He frowned, a flicker of effort crossing his face as he tried to access a memory that simply wasn't there. The blankness in his eyes was his answer. He remembered nothing. Of course, Madison had known he wouldn't. He had never truly heard anything she said during their entire marriage. In his world, she had been a placeholder partner, a highly compensated nanny, and an administrator for his household. A knot of old frustration tightened in her chest, and a dark, malicious thought surfaced. She wanted to hurt him, but the thought died as quickly as it came, replaced by the hollow realization that you can't hurt someone who never cared in the first place. His current quest wasn't about her. It was about fixing a glitch in his otherwise perfect life plan. He was a man who craved control above all else. Ryan finally hung his head, and his voice was laced with a defeated apology. "I'm sorry. I honestly have no memory of you saying those things. I was probably busy with work, but if that's the reason you left, I just can't accept it." Madison took a slow sip of her coffee, resigning herself to a long night in the endless twilight of the Finnish winter. She raised a single, skeptical eyebrow. "Oh, and what about the scent of another woman's perfume on your clothes every single night you came home? Is that a more acceptable reason for you?" Ryan's expression went blank. My source says he looked like he was trying to compute a logical error in her statement, before shaking his head as if the thought was absurd. "Chloe," he said, the name sounding like a question. "You divorced me because of Chloe?" The utter shock in his voice was unmistakable, as if leaving him over another woman was an even more preposterous idea than leaving him for being emotionally absent. Madison just took another sip of coffee and gave a cool, deliberate nod. "Yes, you came home smelling of her signature scent every day. Our son was constantly asking when Aunt Chloe was going to be his new mom. Was I supposed to just desperately cling to the title of Mrs. Hayes, a role I never even wanted?" Ryan's face grew unusually pale, the color draining from his cheeks. "So, you suspected I was cheating on you?" Madison held up a single finger, wagging it slowly in front of his face. "Not suspected. It was a fact. When you started taking Chloe to every company gala and didn't bother correcting people when they introduced her as your wife. When your own friends would mock me to my face, joking about how you and Chloe were clearly the better match. When you signed our divorce papers without even reading them so you could rush off to be with her. At that point, whether you were physically cheating or not became a meaningless detail. Divorcing you was an act of self-preservation, my only way out of the prison of being Mrs. Ryan Hayes." "Nobody enjoys living behind a mask, Julian," she said, her voice dropping. "Being so constricted by rules that you lose who you are. I never, ever wanted to be that empty figurehead for you." Ryan's eyelashes fluttered, and he fell into a long, profound silence. Perhaps he was finally processing the depth of her pain. Or perhaps, my source speculates, he was simply analyzing his failure, looking for a lesson to apply to future ventures. But from where Madison was sitting, it was all irrelevant. He loved Chloe. It was an open secret. He remembered her birthday, planned elaborate gifts, and would drop billion-dollar deals to take her call. He knew every one of her likes and dislikes. His all-consuming devotion to Chloe meant this failure with Madison was an anomaly, one that would never impact his future. Madison glanced at her watch. 4:30 in the morning. She felt a sudden, crushing wave of exhaustion as she realized that, had they still been married, she'd be getting up in 30 minutes to start making his and Tyler's breakfast. She stood up abruptly and pulled the front door open. "Mr. Hayes, I believe you have the answers you came for. Please leave. I need to get some sleep." But before she could finish the sentence, he spoke two words, clear and solemn in the cold air. "I'm sorry." Madison froze, her own words dying in her throat. Ryan looked at her, his gaze direct for the first time all night, and repeated himself slowly. "I'm sorry. I had no idea that all those details, all the things I never noticed, were causing you so much pain. I was wrong. I apologize. Madison couldn't stop the laugh that bubbled up. To wring an apology from the notoriously arrogant Ryan Hayes, she had to be the first person in history. But the victory felt hollow, and a moment later, a sharp pang of her old hurt echoed in her chest. To think that when she finally laid out the mundane, soul crushing facts of their 5-year marriage, even he could finally see her pain. She pressed a hand to her chest, feeling a small, tight knot of anger finally begin to loosen. Maybe this was it, the moment she could finally put the past to rest. But there is one point I don't agree with, Ryan said, shattering her brief moment of peace. Madison looked at him, waiting. He pressed his lips into a thin line. I did not cheat on you, he said firmly. I am not in love with Chloe. The guilt and longing in his eyes were suddenly clear as day. She was my brother's fiancée. I took care of her to fulfill his dying wish. The reason I never corrected people, he continued, his voice thick with emotion, was because I always felt that if my brother had lived, she would have been a rightful Mrs. Hayes. Madison just waved a dismissive hand. It doesn't matter anymore, Ryan. Her indifference seemed to land like a physical blow. He looked genuinely hurt as he insisted. No, it does matter. In the 6 years you've been gone, Tyler and we've missed you terribly. I want to clear up all of this so that you can come back to us. Come back home, to the family. For a brief, surreal second, Madison thought he had to be joking. After the decade she had spent fighting for her freedom, he was standing in her doorway, asking her to willingly walk back into that cage. A small tremor of laughter escaped her lips. Then it grew into a loud, full-throated, unrestrained laugh that filled the small cabin. A look of pure, unadulterated bewilderment spread across Ryan's face. It was clear he had no idea what was so funny. Perhaps, my source concluded, it was because he had never, in all their years together, actually seen the real Madison before. She wiped a tear from her eye, clutching her stomach as the laughter subsided into deep, composing breaths. Ryan, are you serious? It took every ounce of strength I had to finally get away from you. I was told the final break began with a conversation that echoed through the thin walls of her apartment. I've built my own life now, Ryan, a real career. Why on earth would I go back to that? To do what? Become a free nanny for your niece? Or run your ridiculous seafood chowder to your downtown office like some personal courier? Your guilt over your brother, that's your own to carry. You want to fulfill his dying wish and look after Jessica. That's a fine, noble thing. But why are you trying to drag me down with you? I don't owe your brother a thing. I certainly don't owe Jessica anything. And after everything we went through, I absolutely don't owe you. My source said. Ryan tried to say something, to object, but Madison was already at the door, pulling it open. A frigid blast of wind and snow poured in, and the warmth in the room seemed to vanish instantly. She gripped the doorknob, her knuckles white, her voice as cold as the January air swirling around her ankles. Get out. Don't make me say it again. Ryan finally left, but the confrontation left Madison utterly drained, sleep now an impossibility. She tossed and turned until the gray light of morning, forcing herself into her professional life at the embassy. But the moment she walked into her office, she was blindsided by what felt like a coordinated attack. Her superior stood before her, his expression unusually grave. Madison, you haven't been with us for long, but your skills are undeniable. This new energy project we're brokering with Hayes Corp is monumentally important to the relationship between our two countries. The senior officials are flying out to tour their headquarters in the States with Mr. Hayes himself. We need a lead translator to accompany them. I've already submitted your name. You've been away for 6 years after all. It's a perfect opportunity for you to go back and see your family. A tight, professional smile was plastered on Madison's face. But inside, a storm was raging. This had Ryan's fingerprints all over it. Her life had been orderly, quiet, and then he showed up and everything became chaos. She forced that smile to hold and stood. Please rest assured, sir, I will complete the mission successfully. That very afternoon, she was on a private jet, hurtling back toward the United States with Ryan and the official delegation. And in a move she knew couldn't possibly be a coincidence, the seating arrangement placed her right next to him. Madison pinched the bridge of her nose, a wave of exhaustion washing over her, and turned to stare out the window, creating a deliberate wall of silence between them. They had both been up all night, but Ryan showed no signs of fatigue. A few moments into the flight, a soft, thick blanket was gently draped over her shoulders. I was told his movements were careful, as if he truly believed she was asleep and was afraid of waking her, but she wasn't. She just couldn't bring herself to look at him. To Madison, Ryan was a paradox she had to escape, a man she had once genuinely loved and looked up to, but who had also become the chains that bound her. Their entire world had been severed the moment she signed the divorce papers. She just hadn't prepared herself for the reality that stepping off that plane meant facing the one living tie she could never truly cut. Tyler was standing there in the waiting area, holding his grandmother's hand. At 9 years old, he was no longer the soft, round toddler she remembered. He'd shot up, all long limbs and sharp angles. His eyes were red-rimmed, and the second he saw Madison, he cried out a single word that echoed in the terminal. "Mom!" The members of the delegation exchanged confused looks, and someone whispered a question. Madison kept her professional smile perfectly in place and replied smoothly in Finnish, "That poor little boy must have lost his mother." Beside her, Ryan's jaw clenched. My source confirmed he understood the language perfectly. Tyler started to run towards her, but his grandmother's grip was like iron holding him back. The dignified old woman would never allow him to cause a public scene. She simply took his hand and led him away without a word. Madison knew Mrs. Hayes hadn't orchestrated this for some heartwarming reunion. It was a strategic pressure tactic. But she was no longer playing their game and had no reason to obey their rules. The days that followed, accompanying the delegation on their tour of Hayes Corp., were seamless. Professionally, Ryan was flawless, but the second the official duties ended for the day, he cornered her. "Madison, the delegation's work is mostly finished. Why don't you come home with me and see Tyler? He misses you." "Misses me?" Madison couldn't help the skeptical, bitter laugh that escaped. She could only picture the miniature version of Ryan, his face contorted with disdain. "I don't think so. He never liked me before. After being gone for 6 years, he probably dislikes me even more. He wanted Jessica to be his mother. You want to honor your brother's last wish. Why don't you just marry her?" She continued, her voice sharp. "It would be the perfect solution for everyone. And it would save your future wife the trouble of having to help you take care of your sister-in-law." Ryan pinched the bridge of his nose, a deep weariness settling over him. "Madison, do we have to talk like this?" She gave him a cool, dismissive glance. "We don't have to talk at all." With that, she packed her briefcase and headed back to her hotel. As for her own family, There was no point in going back there. But her mood brightened when she learned that her best friend Chloe was in the city. She quickly made plans to meet. The moment they saw each other, Chloe's eyes lit up, grabbing Madison's hands and spinning her around. This is it. This is the real you. It's been 6 years, but seeing you vibrant and happy like this, I am so incredibly happy for you, Maddie. When old friends reconnect, the conversation is a river that flows endlessly. Hours felt like minutes, but in the middle of their animated chatter, Madison's phone rang. It was an unfamiliar local number. She hesitated for a moment, then answered. A woman's tentative voice came through the line. Hello, is this Tyler Hayes' mother? I'm his homeroom teacher. Tyler was in a fight at school with another student. I just called his father, and he instructed me to contact you. Chloe, annoyed at the intrusion from a world they'd just been celebrating Madison's escape from, snatched the phone. You have the wrong number, she snapped and hung up. What is wrong with Ryan? You're divorced. You don't even have his custody. You've only been back in the country for a few days, and he's already pulling this kind of trouble. Before she could finish her rant, the phone rang again. Madison answered. The teacher's voice was no longer tentative. It was anxious and impatient. Mrs. Hayes, I really must insist you come to the school. Adult issues shouldn't impact a child's welfare. Besides, Tyler hit the other boy hard enough that he requires stitches. The other parents are already here, and they're demanding you come and take him to the hospital. There was no getting out of it. She and Chloe had to go. In the principal's office, several disheveled young boys were standing around. All of them had a parent by their side, except for Tyler, who stood defiantly alone. The injured boy's mother was holding her son, pointing an accusing finger at Tyler and scolding him loudly. What is wrong with you, hitting so hard at your age? Didn't your mother ever teach you not to use your fists? Before she had even finished the sentence, the other boys started to snicker. Tyler doesn't have a mother. His mom abandoned him. Another one added, Yeah, Tyler's a loser with no mom. Tyler's face turned a deep crimson. Like a cornered wolf cub, he lunged forward to start the fight all over again. It was obvious the Hayes family had given him some sort of self-defense training, but this time, the other parents were there to protect their own. He didn't stand a chance. As he was pushed and stumbled to the floor, he looked up and saw Madison standing in the doorway. His eyes instantly reddened. Madison could see tears welling up, but he bit his lips so hard it was a wonder it didn't bleed, quickly turning his head as he scrambled back to his feet. Madison ignored Tyler's defiant posture completely. She walked into the room, her gaze sweeping calmly over the adults. She made a simple, factual introduction. I am Tyler Hayes' biological mother. His father and I are divorced, and I do not have custody. For any matters of financial compensation, you will need to speak directly with his father, Ryan Hayes. At her words, Tyler looked up at her in utter disbelief. From the corner of her eye, Madison saw him quickly wipe his eyes, as if terrified she would see him cry. This child, wasn't he the one who had always pushed for them to get a divorce? Where were all these tears coming from now? At the mere mention of Ryan Hayes' name, the other parents exchanged nervous glances, their aggressive postures softening considerably. Ryan's name was a constant fixture in the financial news. Very few people in this town didn't know exactly who he was. This was a minor issue that could have been easily resolved by his staff without his personal involvement. But he had deliberately pushed it onto her. Did he think this little drama would reawaken her maternal love? Did he completely forget that love has to be mutual? Not even all parents love their children. Madison took a quiet, deep breath, pushing away the stinging memory of her own father, dragging her to that sterile Swiss finishing school. Ahem. Mrs. Hayes, even if you are divorced from Mr. Hayes, you still need to give us an explanation for your son's behavior. Madison nodded, her gaze falling lightly on Tyler. Why did you fight? Tyler jutted out his small chin, refusing to speak. She no longer possessed the patience she once had to coax him out of his moods. If you don't want to talk, then you can wait for your father to get here. I have other things to do. I don't have time to waste on this. Her cold words seemed to be the trigger he needed. Like a wounded animal finally lashing out, he turned on her, his eyes red as he shouted, "They said I don't have a mother!" Are you happy now? Why didn't Dad marry Aunt Jessica? She would never ignore me like you do. I hate you. I hate you. Madison waited calmly for him to finish his tirade, then simply raised an eyebrow. When your father and I were still married, you were the one who told me you wanted Jessica to be your mother. Yelling at me back then was at least understandable. Now that we're divorced, if you want someone to be your mother, you should go and find her yourself. The other parents immediately started whispering amongst themselves. Can you believe that? Such a young child trying to break up his parents' marriage. No wonder his mother left him. That must be Jessica Lowe. I think I've seen her with Mr. Hayes at those fancy events. I always thought she was Mrs. Hayes. It turns out she's the other woman. At his age, Tyler was just sensitive enough to understand their words. He couldn't stand hearing what they were saying. He turned to run out of the office, but he only managed a few steps before he stopped cold. Ryan had arrived, flanked by his assistant and bodyguards. His face was a perfect mask of indifference, but he radiated an intimidating presence that made the small principal's office feel suddenly very crowded. From what my source told me, the moment Ryan Hayes entered the principal's office, the air turned to ice. His stare sliced across the room, demanding an explanation without a single word. What had happened here? No one dared to speak. Even his own son, Tyler, stood with his head bowed, a statue of silent fear. Madison, my source said, met his gaze with a cool defiance. You're here. Good. Her voice was steady. As his legal guardian, this is your responsibility to handle. I'm leaving. And with that, she turned, ignoring the calls of Madison and Mom that chased her out the door. Jessica was already in the car, fuming on Madison's behalf. That little terror, she apparently muttered. You shouldn't have even come. But my source filled me in on the details Jessica didn't know. After Madison had left the family home, Tyler had apparently thrown a world-shattering tantrum, screaming that he wanted his father's new girlfriend, Chloe, to be his mom. Ryan, in a rare display of discipline, slapped him once. That's when the boy tried to run away, nearly getting snatched off the street before Chloe, in a stroke of perfect timing, swooped in and saved him. They were a picture-perfect couple, Ryan and Chloe. My source recounted how they went straight to a local bar, the chaos at the school seemingly melting away with every drink. But fate, or perhaps just bad luck, had other plans. As they stumbled out onto the street, tipsy and laughing, they ran headfirst into Ryan and young Tyler. He was holding his son's hand, and the look on his face suggested they'd been waiting there for a while. The moment Ryan's eyes locked on Madison, his whole demeanor shifted, the casual confidence evaporating. All he managed to say was, Madison, we need to talk. And when Ryan Hayes said he needed to talk, It wasn't a request. Seeing no point in a public argument, Madison told Jessica to find another way home and slid into the back of his car. It was an impossibly tense arrangement. Tyler sat up front, a silent observer, while she and Ryan sat in the back, separated by a foot of space that felt like a canyon. The atmosphere was so thick, I'm told she could hear the driver's anxious breathing over the engine's hum. The town car finally pulled up to a high-end restaurant. A valet sprinted to open Madison's door, but Ryan was faster, moving to intercept him. She pointedly ignored the hand he offered, getting out on her own. As she walked past, she saw his outstretched fingers curl slowly into a tight fist, a flicker of raw disappointment crossing his features. She recognized the place instantly. It was the same restaurant she had booked for her birthday 6 years prior. 6 years ago, she had excitedly asked Ryan to celebrate with her, a request that was met with a deafening silence. He had later booked out the entire restaurant for Chloe, leaving Madison without so much as a table for one. Now, all these years later, he was bringing her here, a grand gesture that landed with a hollow thud. She no longer needed it. Madison sat, getting straight to the point. If you have something to say, just say it. But let me be perfectly clear on two things, she continued, her voice unwavering. Transferring custody is off the table, and so is getting remarried. The message was unmistakable. She wanted neither him nor his world. Ryan's brow furrowed as if the words were in a language he couldn't quite process. Across the table, Tyler's eyes were red-rimmed, on the verge of spilling over. But Madison had to remind herself that she was no longer the mother who would sacrifice her own sanity to soothe his every tear. Finally, Ryan found his voice. "Madison, if you didn't like me, why did you agree to marry me?" He seemed genuinely bewildered. "I always thought we fit, that you were the most perfect Mrs. Hayes." A shadow of what looked like genuine pain crossed his face, but the question hurled Madison back into a memory so dark it made her physically recoil. She squeezed her eyes shut, fighting to push away the terrifying images. It was no use. She had to accept that, even with her freedom, the scars of the past were still there. Taking a slow breath and a sip of water, she met his gaze. If you were sent to a finishing school where you were tormented every day, locked in dark rooms and beaten, and the only escape was to become a flawless mold of a high society wife, you would have agreed too, wouldn't you? Ryan just stared, his confusion deepening into shock. A bitter laugh escaped Madison's lips. "You don't actually believe that I, a woman who was at the top of her class her entire life, didn't love to learn, do you? From the time I was 16, your family had me selected, groomed to be the future Mrs. Hayes. At 18, I rebelled. I got a boyfriend. And for that, I was shipped off to that place. They didn't let me out until our wedding day. I still can't think about it without feeling sick. So no," she said, her voice laced with the finality of it all. "I have no desire to be your Mrs. Hayes. Not back then, and certainly not now. I did try, at first. I let myself hope for a real marriage, a family filled with love, but you and Chloe personally demolished that hope. You made me understand that the Hayes family is nothing but a gilded cage. A cage that would have crushed me completely if I hadn't found a way out. Now, I have my own life. The best thing you can do for me is stay out of it. As for this restaurant, after what happened 6 years ago, the very idea of this place makes my stomach turn." With that, Madison grabbed her bag and walked toward the exit, not giving Ryan or his son a chance to utter a single word. Just as her hand touched the door, she heard a strained voice call out from behind her. I'm sorry. I never knew you went through that. But I have to ask. You said you hoped for a happy marriage. Did that mean you cared for me? That you might have loved me? If you did, is there any chance, even the smallest one, that we could try again? Madison didn't turn. She didn't answer. She never could have predicted, however, that the next day her estranged father would appear at her hotel, wearing a desperate, apologetic smile that didn't reach his eyes. My dear daughter, where have you been hiding all these years? Why haven't you even called your family? Madison looked at the new streaks of gray at his temples and felt a complicated knot of emotions tighten in her chest. The man who once wielded absolute power over her life was now practically bowing before her. It was a stark reminder that the mountains she once thought were insurmountable could, in fact, be moved. Mr. Vance, she said, her tone as cool as marble. If you have something to say, please be direct. There's no reason to play these games. He was visibly thrown by her cold formality, his practiced smile wavering. Well, your dad was just thinking. Since you haven't been home for so long, maybe you could come by for dinner. In your absence, he continued, regaining his footing. Mr. Hayes has been an incredible supporter of our family's business. I can tell he still cares for you deeply. You two divorced without any family consultation. Now that you're back, perhaps our families can sit down and discuss things. After all, you were promised to him since you were 16. Madison finally understood the real reason for his visit. Her smile turned frigid. You're suggesting Ryan and I should get remarried? Her father nodded with frantic eagerness, a predatory gleam in his eyes. She scoffed. What did the Hayes family promise you this time? A lucrative partnership? A new project? If Vance Industries has to resort to selling its daughter to stay afloat, then, frankly, it deserves to go bankrupt. His smile vanished, replaced by a flash of his old anger. You've been gone a few years, and suddenly you think you've grown wings? Is that any way to speak to your father? If someone hadn't been whispering in Ryan's ear about that damn finishing school, he never would have pulled all his investments from our company overnight. In a single evening, our market value was cut in half, he seethed. You are coming with me to see him today, and that is final. He lunged for her arm, but she twisted away from his grasp. This rotten, festering piece of her past. It was time to cut it out for good. An hour later, my source confirmed, Madison was sitting in the oppressive silence of her father's living room. Ryan was already there, with Tyler sitting quietly beside him. Ryan was looking at her father with the same cold indifference he had once reserved for her. Madison ignored them all, choosing a lone armchair across the room. Ryan turned to her, picking his words with deliberate care. Madison, the reason I came here today. She cut him off with a look so sharp it could have drawn blood. Why you're here is of no interest to me. In fact, the best thing you could do is not be here at all. Ryan's expression hardened. After a long, heavy moment, he tried again. I'm not trying to put pressure on you. He was interrupted by her father, who bustled into the room carrying a bottle of expensive liquor. Come, try some of my best vintage, he said, pouring a generous glass for Ryan. Madison has always been a bit spirited. I've already had a stern talk with her. She came back this time to settle down and live a proper life with you, Mr. Hayes, he said, bowing and scraping as he refilled Ryan's glass. He spoke as if he were a feudal lord bartering away property. In his world, it was clear Madison had never been a daughter. She was only ever a commodity to be traded. But Ryan, the man with all the power, remained silent, letting him talk. Her father pressed on, his voice growing more desperate. Mr. Hayes, I know you're still upset about her divorcing you so impulsively 6 years ago. We can keep the new wedding small, of course. Or if you don't want a ceremony at all, that's fine too. Just take her back. What do you say? The answer came not from Ryan, but from the front door, as it was pushed open with decisive force. I say not a chance, a new voice boomed. What century are we in? Still arranging marriages? And trying to poach from my State Department, no less? A team of men in dark suits with earpieces filed into the room, methodically securing the perimeter. They were followed by an older man in a simple but official looking jacket. Though his hair was white, he commanded the room, his eyes as sharp and focused as a hawk's. Though he was a businessman, Madison's father instantly recognized the kind of security detail that protects high-level government officials. The atmosphere in the room plunged into a deep freeze. He scurried forward, bowing slightly. Sir, I don't know what brings you to my humble home, but it is a tremendous honor. The old man snorted, his gaze withering. In 1950, the marriage law abolished arranged marriages. In 1992, the Violence Against Women Act explicitly prohibited domestic abuse. Yet, here you are, forcibly detaining one of our State Department diplomats to arrange her marriage. Are you attempting to rewind history? Her father froze solid. Not just him, but everyone who thought they knew Madison, including the son who once saw her as little more than a nanny, stared at the old man, utterly stunned. State Department? Sir, this is just a family dinner. There must be some mistake, he stammered. My daughter, she never even finished college. How could she possibly be with the State Department? She's just a housewife. She ran away a few years ago over some divorce nonsense. You shouldn't. Before he could finish his sentence, two of the security men stepped forward and firmly restrained him. Into the shocked silence, Madison rose and walked to the old man's side, her expression apologetic. My source learned she had managed to send a quick text to a colleague when her father first took her. Director, I am so sorry you had to come all this way for my personal family matters. The old man, a senior official she had met when she first joined the diplomatic corps, simply waved a dismissive hand. Nonsense. I've been told that her boss, a man not known for handing out easy compliments, called her one of the most brilliant assets in the department. He described a young woman, Madison, who commanded 5 languages and possessed a mind sharp enough to cut glass. My source overheard him say, if anyone ever tried to sideline her into being a housewife, he'd be the first to raise hell. Because in this day and age, a woman like her belonged on the world stage, not tied down by a marriage. The organization, he insisted, would always stand behind a person's right to choose who they love. But the old world of arranged marriages was something they would never condone. My source told me he then looked Madison straight in the eye and said he was cutting her family leave short, trusting she understood. Madison just smiled, a look of relief washing over her face as she told him she was more than ready to come back. The old director simply nodded. The matter settled. The story takes a sharp turn here. A black government sedan, flanked by several police cruisers, rolled up the long manicured driveway of the Hayes estate. As Madison was seeing her director off, she watched uniformed officers approach her father, Mr. Evans, and present him with a warrant. I'm told the words hung in the air. The so-called finishing school he'd sent his daughter to was under investigation for illegal confinement, abuse, and intense psychological manipulation. Please come with us to assist in the investigation, they said. their voices calm but firm. I heard her father's shouts of innocence echoed across the lawn, but the officers were unmoved. What was supposed to be a quiet family dinner had imploded. Madison was about to step into the director's car when she heard a small, choked voice call out, "Mom!" from behind her. Her hand, I'm told, froze on the car door as her director gave her a knowing, permissive nod. He understood the immense pressure on people in their line of work. "A diplomat's life is a hard one," he apparently said. "You're posted overseas for years with almost no time for family. It's better to sort these things out before you go." And with that, he was gone, leaving Madison to face her husband, Ryan, and their son, Tyler. The little boy was gripping his father's hand, his eyes wide and shimmering with tears he was fighting desperately to hold back. You, you really don't want to be my mom anymore?" The words seemed to catch in Tyler's throat. "You really don't want me?" His bottom lip quivered. "Dad and we've missed you so much these last few years. I see him in his office sometimes, just staring at your picture. What I said back then, I was just a dumb kid. I didn't get it. Can you, can you please forgive me, Mom? Can you please love me again?" Seeing him like that, Madison felt a wave of profound sadness crash over her. This was, after all, the child she had carried for 9 months, the boy she had almost died bringing into this world. A part of her couldn't help but love him, couldn't help but feel that pull of sympathy. But how could she willingly embrace the memory of a blade that had been turned against her? In the suffocating loneliness of the Hayes family, her own son had been the one to side with her tormentors. For her own sanity, she could find a way to forgive, but she could never forget the scars. My source says Madison looked at him, her expression impossibly gentle. "You and I never really had much time together. For most of the few years we did, you were just a baby, learning to talk. I held you every single day, teaching you your first words, but I doubt you remember any of that. Then, when you were old enough to understand things," she continued, "you decided I wasn't the mother you wanted. You chose someone else. And even though you were just a child, the heartbreak I felt in that moment was completely real. For the next 6 years, I was a ghost in your life. I know nothing about your schooling, how you were raised. By all accounts, I have no right to tell you how to live. But I'm going to tell you one thing today, and this might be the very last thing I ever get to teach you. Every person has to be responsible for what they say and do. Being just a child isn't a free pass that automatically earns you forgiveness." As she spoke those final words, a desperate sob tore through the air behind her. "Mom, I know I was wrong. Don't go. Please don't leave me." For a split second, Madison's stride faltered, but she never stopped walking. People could call her cold. They could call her irresponsible. But she knew she had already given Tyler everything she could. He would remain with Ryan, get the finest education money could buy, and never want for comfort or care. One day, he would inherit the entire Hayes Corporation. The life that others spend their whole lives dreaming of was his from birth. He had more than anyone could ever ask for. Yes, losing a mother might leave an indelible mark on his soul, but for him to gain that mother back, Madison would have had to sacrifice her entire self. And if he had been a boy who had truly loved her from the start, maybe that's a price she would have been willing to pay. But he wasn't. And that was the quiet tragedy of it all. Her past life, her marriage, her motherhood had been defined by failure. But in this moment, she had finally succeeded in becoming her own person. Someone in this world had to love her unconditionally. If no one else would, she decided, then she would have to be the one. And with that thought, a small, genuine smile touched her lips as she walked away from the Hayes estate, her steps feeling lighter than they had in years. On the day she was scheduled to fly back to Finland, Ryan showed up at the airport. He didn't ask her to reconsider, didn't ask if there was any chance left for them. He just stood there, watching her for a long time before he posed a question that could never be answered. "Madison," he said, his voice thick with regret, "if we could have a do-over, I would have cherished you. I would have loved you," he confessed, "instead of this, instead of only realizing what I had after I'd already lost it. I just took it for granted that you'd always be there. It never even occurred to me that nothing I did ever made you happy. Madison, I am so, so sorry." She didn't reply, her eyes fixed on the flickering departures board. "You saw me off the last time, too," she said quietly. "We just never got to say a real goodbye." "Ryan, let's say a proper goodbye this time." The finality of that word seemed to break something in him. A muscle in his jaw twitched, and his eyes filled with an unbearable sadness. "Can't we?" His lips trembled, unable to finish the sentence. Madison simply stood before him and opened her arms. "Don't look so broken. We shared a chapter of our lives. I'm an old friend who knows you better than most, right? Let's just have a hug." Before she could say another word, he pulled her into an embrace that smelled of warm cedar wood. Ryan held on tight, his arms a vice around her, as if he were trying to fuse her into his own being. In all their years of marriage, they had almost never been this close. A simple hug, holding hands while they walked, just sitting down to talk without an agenda. These were the small intimacies Madison had once longed for, things she had yearned for and been denied. And now, at the very moment she no longer needed them, they were being offered to her freely. She sighed, gently patting his back, feeling his shoulders begin to shake. "Tyler," she managed to say, her voice a little tight, "please take good care of him. And if you ever find someone who makes you happy, build a new life. Just be good to her this time." Ryan only held her tighter, shaking his head as a single cool tear fell onto her neck. I'm told Madison couldn't help but think about fate's cruel sense of humor. She had always believed Ryan felt nothing for her, which had made her decision to leave so clean, so absolute. She truly thought her leaving was the best thing for everyone. She got her freedom, Ryan would be free to find love, and Tyler would get the kind of mother he'd always wanted. She never imagined it was all just a long, tragic series of missed signals. It seems that for Ryan, too, their entire relationship was his life's biggest regret. He whispered into her hair, his voice ragged. "It kills me that I never held you like this before." For a fleeting moment, Madison's own eyes started to burn, but she blinked it back and smiled with a sense of finality. She gently pushed herself away from him. "It doesn't matter anymore, Ryan. We have to move on. We can't keep looking back." He grabbed her hand, his gaze desperate. "I won't have a new wife, and Tyler will only ever have one mother. I know we hurt you and you can't forgive us. But Tyler and I will wait for you," he vowed. "If you ever want to see us, even for a day, just tell me. I don't care where I am, I will bring him to you. Madison, my door will always, always be open for you." Just then, a small shape burst out from behind a nearby column. It was Tyler, his eyes red and puffy. "Mom," he choked out, "I know I was wrong. I'll wait for you. I'll wait for as long as it takes for you to want to be my mom again." Madison knelt down, and just as she had done 1,000 times when he was a toddler, she gently wiped the tears from his cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Tyler. I can't stay here and be the mother you need every day. But I will always be your mother. Nothing and no one can ever change that." "But a mother," she said, her voice clear and steady, "has to be her own person first." At that moment, the airport PA system crackled to life. "Passengers for Finnair flight AY52 to Helsinki, please proceed to gate B12 for boarding." Madison stood up, gave Tyler's head one last soft pat, and looked at Ryan. "Take him home." And with that, she grabbed her small bag and walked toward the gate without looking back. As the plane broke through the clouds, the city lights below scattered like a blanket of fallen stars. It was then that Madison finally let it sink in. She had left again. Maybe someday the unbreakable bond of blood would pull them back into the same orbit, but her choice would be the same. The road ahead of her was long and uncertain, but for the first time, it was entirely her own